Hey there, buttercups! Actually, I should say bonjour instead. Today we are diving into one of the most dramatic, chaotic, and crazy times in history, the French Revolution. Get ready, because we're about to uncover everything from the wild fashion to the even wilder political drama. Get ready to be amazed as we learn some seriously interesting facts together. Okay, so imagine this. It is the 1700s and France is basically the coolest kid in Europe. Picture the grand palaces, the opulent gardens, and the streets bustling with the latest fashion trends. France was the epitome of style and sophistication. The French aristocracy was living it up, setting trends that the rest of Europe could only dream of following. They have got the fancy clothes, the delicious food, and the most exquisite art. French fashion was all about extravagance, with elaborate gowns and powdered wigs. The cuisine was equally lavish, with multi-course meals that showcased the finest ingredients and culinary techniques. The Rococo art and architecture added a touch of whimsy and elegance to everything. And they are always throwing the biggest parties. These were not just any parties. They were grand balls held in magnificent halls, with music, dancing, and endless feasts. The Palace of Versailles was the ultimate party venue, where the elite gathered to celebrate and show off their wealth. But guess what? Those parties were super expensive. The cost of maintaining such a lavish lifestyle was astronomical. The royal court's spending was out of control, with money being poured into extravagant banquets, luxurious palaces, and expensive gifts. France was deeply in debt, like seriously in debt. The country had borrowed heavily to finance wars and support its extravagant lifestyle. The national debt was spiraling out of control, and the government was struggling to find ways to pay it off. Taxes were high, but they were not enough to cover the massive expenses. The rich were living like kings and queens, literally. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette were the epitome of royal excess. They lived in unimaginable luxury, surrounded by opulence and splendor. The aristocracy followed suit, indulging in a lifestyle that was completely detached from the reality of the common people. While regular people could not even afford basic food, it was totally unfair. The peasants and working-class citizens were struggling to survive, facing high taxes, poor harvests, and rising bread prices. The disparity between the rich and the poor was stark, and resentment was growing. And to make things worse, new ideas about freedom and equality were spreading quickly. The Enlightenment brought forth thinkers who challenged the status quo, advocating for liberty, equality, and fraternity. These revolutionary ideas were discussed in salons and coffee houses, inspiring people to question the existing social and political order, making people wonder why they even needed a king. Pamphlets and speeches circulated, criticizing the monarchy and calling for change. The common people began to realize that they had the power to demand a better life, free from the tyranny of the aristocracy. It was a perfect mix for a revolution. The financial crisis, social inequality, and the spread of revolutionary ideas created a volatile situation. The storming of the Bastille marked the beginning of the French Revolution, a turning point in history that would change France and the world forever. So, King Louis XVI finally realized that France was about to explode. The country was in turmoil, and the people were growing increasingly restless. The financial crisis was deepening, and the common folk were struggling to make ends meet. Bread prices were soaring, and hunger was becoming a daily reality for many. The lavish lifestyle of the monarchy was in stark contrast to the suffering of the masses, and the tension was palpable. His solution? Call a meeting of the Estates General, which was like the French version of Congress. This assembly was supposed to represent the three estates of the realm: the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. It was a bold move, considering the Estates General hadn't been convened in over a century and a half. The hope was that this gathering would help address the financial crisis and bring about some much-needed reforms. The problem was, the Estates General had not met in over 175 years. Imagine trying to revive an ancient institution that had been dormant for so long. The halls were dusty, the procedures were outdated, and no one really knew how to proceed. It was like trying to jumpstart a car that had been sitting in a garage for decades. The machinery of governance was rusty, and the stakes were incredibly high. It was like trying to use a really old phone after forgetting to charge it forever. The lines of communication were frayed, and the connection was weak. The representatives of the three estates had to navigate a maze of outdated protocols and procedures. It was a daunting task, and the pressure was immense. The future of France hung in the balance, and everyone knew that failure was not an option. The Estates General was divided into three groups: the clergy, the nobles, and everyone else, the Third Estate. The problem was, the clergy and the nobility hardly paid any taxes at all, while the Third Estate nearly paid all of France's taxes. And now the two other estates of the Estates General wanted to raise new taxes on the Third Estate. The clergy and the nobility held most of the power, while the Third Estate, which represented the vast majority of the population, had been largely marginalized. This imbalance of power was a major source of frustration for the commoners, who felt that their voices were not being heard. They were determined to change the status quo and demand a greater say in the governance of the country. And spoiler alert, the Third Estate was not happy. They were fed up with being treated as second-class citizens and were ready to fight for their rights. The mood was tense, and the air was thick with anticipation. The commoners were organizing, rallying, and making their voices heard. They were no longer willing to accept the status quo and were prepared to take drastic measures to ensure that their demands were met. They were tired of being ignored by the other two groups. The clergy and the nobility had long enjoyed privileges and power, while the commoners bore the brunt of the hardships. The Third Estate was demanding equality, justice, and a fair share of the decision-making power. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, and the world was watching to see how this historic meeting would unfold. The fate of France was at a crossroads, and the actions of the Estates General would shape the future of the nation. The Third Estate was like, "We're tired of being treated badly." They wanted real change, not just small favors from the king. So they did something super bold. They left the Estates General and declared themselves the National Assembly, the true representatives of the French people. It was like finally standing up to a bully. The National Assembly wanted to create a new France, one where everyone had a say. Locked out of their meeting room, the National Assembly was in a tough spot. The doors were barred, and the king's guards stood firm, refusing them entry. It was a clear message from the monarchy. Their voices were not welcome in the halls of power, but this only fueled their determination. But did they give up? No way. Instead of retreating, they stood their ground, their faces set with resolve. They knew that their mission was too important to abandon. The future of France was at stake, and they were ready to fight for it. They marched over to a nearby indoor tennis court and made a promise. They would not leave until France had a new constitution. This indoor tennis court, usually a place of leisure and sport, became the stage for a pivotal moment in history. The air was thick with anticipation and the weight of their commitment. Talk about making a point. The leaders of the National Assembly stood before their peers, delivering impassioned speeches that echoed through the court. Their words were filled with hope, determination, and a vision for a new France. They spoke of liberty, equality, and fraternity, ideals that would become the foundation of the revolution. This was the famous tennis court oath, a super important moment for the revolution. It was a bold declaration that they would not be silenced or stopped. It was like a powerful song, declaring that change was coming, whether the king liked it or not. The energy in the room was electric, and it spread like wildfire through the streets of France. The people were ready for change, and the tennis court oath was the spark that ignited the revolution. This moment was not just about a new constitution, it was about a new beginning for the people of France. The revolutionaries' fervor was contagious, and their message clear: the old ways were over, and a new era was dawning. The Bastille, a huge prison where Voltaire himself was once imprisoned, represented the king's control over the people. So on July 14, 1789, the people of Paris decided they'd had enough. They stormed the Bastille for its cache of arms and weapons. Afterwards, they tore down the Bastille, brick by brick. This event, Bastille Day, became a symbol of the revolution's power. It showed that even the strongest things can be overcome by people working together. Inspired by smart thinkers like John Locke and Voltaire, the National Assembly wrote a very important document, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. This document said that liberty, equality, and fraternity were the most important principles. It was like a reminder that everyone has rights that no king can take away. The declaration inspired revolutions and changes all over the world. It was a huge victory for human rights. Remember how excited we were about the revolution? Well, things were about to get darker. The revolution was about to get much more extreme. Enter the Jacobins, a political group led by Maximilien Robespierre. They were like the popular kids of the revolution. But instead of talking about school, they were planning executions. The monarchy was abolished, King Louis XVI was executed, and France became a very dangerous place. The Reign of Terror was a terrifying time. Robespierre, thinking that fear was the only way to control people, ordered many executions. Anyone who seemed against the revolution was in danger. It was a time of fear and violence, where even saying something wrong could get you killed. It shows how even good intentions can go terribly wrong. As always, dictators make mistakes, and Robespierre went too far. The people, tired of being afraid, finally fought back. Robespierre was arrested and executed. It was like instant karma. This marked the end of the Reign of Terror and a return to a more normal life. After the revolution, a new leader emerged, Napoleon Bonaparte. A brilliant military leader, Napoleon quickly gained power and became Emperor of France. Napoleon's reign ended the French Revolution, but it began a new chapter in French history, one with both good and bad times. Napoleon had a huge impact on France and the world. Voila, and there you have it. The French Revolution, a story of drama, excitement, and lots of surprises. From the storming of the Bastille to the rise of Napoleon, we have learned so much. Remember, history is not always good, but it is always important. So next time you want to make a change, remember to be smart and fight for what you believe in. Until next time, stay curious and stay awesome. Bye!
Thank you for watching. Hope you found this video informative and entertaining. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. We do like to know and hear your feedback. And if you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get early access to our videos, and where we post bonus material. Till next time, this is Geeky Tidbits saying cheers and have a good day.